It's episode 40, and it's J.R.R. Tolkien's birthday. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and then in darkness bind them. Wahaha! Precious, 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 precious. Good old J.R.R. Wrote some great books. He invented fantastic literature in English, practically. And he was a bona fide professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford University. So he knew his druids from his fluids. He was a smart dude. Yeah, you know who else's birthday it is? John Paul Jones of the Zepp. What more Tolkien-ish band is there than the Zepp? Oh my God, we got to work classic rock into this episode somehow. But first, something to really make us happy. This is the first episode after New Year. And of course, after New Year, it is a good time for us to reflect on how fucking smart our friends are who don't drink. Oh my God. Booze, 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 booze. Wonderful booze. So friends who don't drink, pointy hats off to you, okay? And but the thing is, sometimes what happens in New Year's or after New Year's is that you get these little fruitcake things. You know, the little fruitcake things with the green cherries and they weigh like as much as a brick? So some dudes in Colorado, in Manitou Springs in Colorado in 1995, they were trying to figure out what to do with all these wretched fruitcakes, and they thought, well, let's make a competition out of it. So that's a great idea. So they created the first annual National Fruitcake Toss Day, and that's what it is today, people, National Fruitcake Toss Day. So these dudes in Colorado, I mean, they started out just chucking the fucking things, okay, like this. Yep, so, you know, old school toss, you know, it's like a shot put or something, or a discus throw, you know, but then they got all competitive and an arms race ensued. So some dudes came up with like this catapults like this. And then there's always some dude that doesn't know when to stop. So some dude came up with a frickin' howitzer, and they're firing these fruitcakes off at high velocities across the football field. Somebody could get hurt. But anyway, I think this is fantastic. It's a great way to deal with unwanted fruitcake, and it looks like fun. All right, so in episode 40, we are going to knit together some of this fine fabric that we've been talking about here. So we got all the pieces. We got an old song with maybe some like pagany, druidy references. So Tolkien, tick. We got classic rock. John Paul Jones, tick. We got a murder mystery. We got a murder ballad, okay? And you know how much we love those. So, and last but not least, it's all about booze, okay? Druids, classic rock, murder, booze. Bring it on, baby. John Barleycorn. It's gonna be good. John Barleycorn. It's an old song, man. We have a version of it that was written down in the middle of the 1500s. That's practically 500 years ago, for God's sakes. It's really old. But, you know, our friends, the ethnomusicologists, they got to dig in. Maybe it's older. They got to find out. They're eating this stuff up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They cannot get enough of it. And it's reasonable because it's a weird, mysterious song. Like, it seems to have some murderous behavior in it. And, you know, murderous behavior in folk music, that's what we're all about. It goes together like soup and sandwich, right? It seems to be something to do with drinking. And, you know, despite what I said about New Year, you know, it's been associated with drinking for years. Jack London, you know, Call of the Wild Jack London, he wrote a book called John Barleycorn, like in the early 1900s, and it was all a sort of an autobiographical story of his struggle with alcoholism. So the word John Barleycorn has been associated with booze for years. Somebody described the song as an allegorical story of death, resurrection, and drinking beer. So, sounds fascinating, right? the song's been known throughout the breadth and width of England for 500 years. Everybody's singing this song. It's a well-known song. More recently, like, in the English folk days of the late 50s, early 60s, the band The Watersons did a very influential version that inspired a lot of other players to learn the song. Fairport Convention did a version, and so did Steel Eye Span. So our folk rock heroes, they did one. Of course, Stevie Winwood and Traffic did a whole album called John Barleycorn Must Die. So what is with these folk rock guys and these classic rock guys doing this ancient folk song? Like I said, it's mysterious. It seems to have something to do with drinking. It seems to be murderous in some ways. It's hard to say exactly what's going on in the song at certain points. So let me try and break this down for you, okay? So let's start with, on the surface of it, it is murderous. So what's the song trying to tell us? What are the words? Like, what are the facts? Just the facts, ma'am. So it's an old song, right? So there are hundreds of versions. But back at the end of the 1700s, old Robbie Burns, it's going to be Robbie Burns Day in January on the 25th. So we should do something. We should eat some haggis or something. Anyway, be that as it may, old Robbie Burns wrote down a version of John Barleycorn, and it's kind of become the standard. So let's take a look at, what did he say? So his first verse, there's three dudes that show up, that coming from the west, and they've made a solemn vow that John Barleycorn must die. So it's like the good, the bad, and the ugly. These three dudes show up on the horizon. One of them's wearing a poncho or something. And it's bad news, right? It's bad news for John Barleycorn, for sure. So I guess they get him. And, there's some roughhousing ensues, and they're throwing dirt on his head. And it seems like, what are they, burying him? Or are they just leaving him out in the field? So, next verse. They have established that he's dead. But is he really? It's not too clear, because they've left him out in the field, and all through the long time, and he's getting pale and miserable. But suddenly, boop, he pops up. It's like Monty Python, I'm not dead yet. And he pops up, and he's got a long beard, and he's become a man. So I guess he wasn't a man before. He was more of a boy. Then these three dudes from the West, they hire guys. So I guess they're a gang or a cartel or something. They hire guys with scythes, those pointy, cutty things, like that death has, and to cut him down at the knee. And then they roll him up and they tie him up, and they poke him with pitchforks in the heart, and then they throw him on a cart. And then in the next verse, they wheel him around the field and around, and eventually they come to a barn. Now, anybody who has ever seen a horror film knows that the barn is not where you want to end up. So he's in the barn, and then there's these other guys, and they've got these sticks, and they separate the skin from his bone, and then they grind him up between stones. Sounds pretty horrible, eh? So John Barleycorn is not having a good day at all. But finally, the last verse really is the non-murderous verse. It's the drinking verse. So basically they say, here's little Sir John. They call him Sir now. So I guess a little show of respect for enduring all that murderous behavior. And they say, here he is in a nut brown bowl, a little brandy in a glass. So John Barleycorn basically has become booze and courage, more or less. So mysterious. I mean, on the surface of it, there's some pretty nasty stuff going on. But then you take a second read and you go, maybe it's not murderous. Maybe it's harvest. Okay, let's regroup. Take two. So let's go back to the first verse. So the three dudes show up, okay? And Barleycorn must die, right? So they're putting him in the ground. They're burying him. And they're plowing, sowing, and harrowing, and then they throw dirt on him. They've planted seeds. So John Barleycorn is just another word for seeds, like barley or corn, maybe. And then the next verse, they let him lie for a long time until rain fell, and then his little head came up. So this is spring. Like, the barley's coming up. He's grown a long beard. Well, that's kind of, what barley does, right? It gets that kind of, that fuzzy stuff on it. And then later, third verse, they hire men with scythes to chop him down. Well, that's what you do, right? And they wrap him up, and they got their pitchforks, and they put him on the cart. Okay, sounds good so far. And then they ride him around the field, and they get to the barn, and they husk him. They separate his skin from his bone, right? And then they grind him between two stones. So they're making flour out of John Barleycorn. And then the last verse is basically John Barleycorn has been fermented and turned into booze. So, you think, whew, wow, that was a close one. I thought there was murderous behavior going on, and they're just talking about planting and the seasons, and it's just an old kind of story of resurrection and rebirth, maybe. But then let's take one last look. Maybe it is actually pagan. All right, I don't want to get all pinheaded on you, and I don't want to go all frickin' ethnomusicologist on your ass, but you look at the words of this song, and if you think about English ancient history, there's something kind of makes you think this song has its origins in some kind of religious or magical ritual that probably involves murder. Okay, for sure we know that the ancient English people practiced human sacrifice. And there's this concept called the Corn King, or the Corn God, which was pretty common in ancient Celtic and Britain societies, apparently, where basically they pick a guy through lots or election. Somehow they pick a guy, and they go, okay, buddy, you're the Corn King this year, and you're going to be able to live the high life. Anything you want. You want more booze, you want more food. You're the king. What do you want? We'll get it for you. But then at the end of the year, sorry, there's one little thing we have to get you to do, and that's die. So at the end of the year, they would take the Corn King and they'd kill him in all sorts of horrible ways, and they'd tear him apart in different pieces, and they'd plow him into the earth. And that's the way they figured that they would guarantee that the crops would come up again next year. Because this whole cycle of, seasons and weather and stuff, all pretty frickin' mysterious to ancient people, right? So this is their way to kind of say, okay, we're taking care of business here. We got the Corn King, we treated him good all year, then we kill him, and we plow him into the dirt, and next year we'll make a new Corn King, and we'll continue this beautiful cycle, and we'll continue to be able to eat and not starve to death. So look at the first verse, okay? So you got the three guys coming from the west. Okay, think about that. If you're in Ireland, the west, there's nothing. There is no west, right? So anybody coming from the west is a god or a fairy or dead. The west is the land where the sun sets, right? It's the land of death. It's the opposite of the baby Jesus story, where the three wise men come from the east, which is the land of life, where the sun rises. These three dudes, they're coming from the land of death. So, some people are thinking, okay, the three guys are like the 3 months of winter, maybe. Or maybe they're three gods. They're like retribution, they're death. The other thing is, just in general, the number 3 is super important in ancient Celtic myth. When people go off on their vision quests to find the goddess, or to do their quest, they often go off in groups of 3. 3 guys go off, or three girls go off, and they get turned into swans. Doesn't seem fair, does it? But anyway, it's there's a feeling I get when I look to the west. Oh wait, that's Led Zeppelin. Sorry. But anyway, you see what I'm saying. The West is a kind of a magical place. So these 3 dudes show up from the West, and it's all about getting rid of the old king, getting a new king. So I think there's one more thing we have to talk about, and that's classic rock. All right, so let's tie up the loose ends here. Stevie Winwood, musical genius, child prodigy. He joined the Spencer Davis Group when he was 14 years old, one of the biggest rock groups of the 60s. And he's 14 frickin' years old. And he is just rocking it and, playing Give Me Some Lovin' and all that. Later on, he forms Blind Faith with Eric Clapton. Like, he is such a musical genius, everybody wants to play with him. So he forms this band Traffic. And I think in like 67 or something. And they do a bunch of albums. I think they do 3 albums. And then Steve Winwood is thinking, it's time for me to do a solo album. And I'm going to do it all by myself because I'm a freaking musical genius. So he's there at his place. He can play the drums, the organ, the guitar, the bass. He can sing. He's the whole freaking package. But while he's doing that, he's thinking, I miss my band. This sucks a bit, this doing it all by yourself. This sucks. So he calls his buddies in, Jim Capaldi and Chris Wood from Traffic, and they start recording with him, and they start doing some stuff. And this guy, Chris Wood, is actually kind of somewhat comes from the folk scene. And he saw the Wattersons do John Barleycorn when he was a younger lad. And so he kind of suggests this song to Steve Winwood. And now Steve Winwood knows this song. He calls it The Passion of the Corn. So Steve Winwood kind of understands that this whole song is based about, the seasons and growing and transformation of the barley into alcohol and stuff. He kind of gets it, right? So he kind of puts together this song, John Barleycorn Must Die, and they play it, and it ended up being the 4th Traffic record. And I think it was one of their biggest records to that point, and they released that in 1970. So I kind of took this song. I generally took the Traffic arrangement, sort of, not really. I fucked around with it a little bit. And I took Robbie Burns' words, okay? So pretty much the same as the Traffic words, but not exactly. And I did a little recording of that. So I hope you like that. I hope you guys are good. I hope, you're getting into just enough trouble that you don't have to go to jail and that you can keep yourselves happy and keep yourselves, safe, keep sane. And John Barleycorn, here she comes.
Oh, there were 3 men came out of the west, their fortunes for to try. And these 3 men made a solemn vow, John Barleycorn should die. They plowed, they sowed, they harrowed him in, throwed clods upon his head. Then these 3 men made a solemn vow, John Barleycorn was dead. They let him lie for a long, long time, till the rain from heaven did fall. Then little Sir John, he raised up his head, and he soon amazed them all. They let him lie till the long midsummer, till he looked both pale and wan. Then little Sir John growed a long, long beard, and so became a man. They hired men with the sides so sharp, they cut him off down by the knee. They rolled him and tied him around by the waist, serving him most barbarously. They hired men with the sharp pitchforks, who pierced him to the heart. But the loader he served far worse than that, for he bound him to the car. They rode him round and round the field till they came into a barn, and there they made a solemn oath, poor John Barleycorn. They hired men with the crabtree sticks to cut 'em skin from bone. But the miller served him far worse than that, for he ground him between two stones. Here's little Sir John in the nut brown bowl, and brandy in a glass, and little Sir John in the nut brown bowl proved the stronger man at last. For the hunter, he can't hunt the fox, nor so loudly blow his horn. And the tinker, he can't mend his kettles or pots without a little John Barleycorn.